Guys, this is our last test review for the year. Urinary system is also known as the excretory system because it produces and secretes or excretes urine. It's also known as the renal system. If you use your medical terminology, renal means pertaining to the kidney, and that's really what does the work in this system. Whoops. Two major functions of the system. Remember, there's tons of things that it does, so we're going to talk about lots of functions, but to sum them up, one is to maintain homeostasis, which is that constant state of internal balance. So how does the body need to stay balanced? Well, we have all sorts of vital signs that need to be balanced, all sorts of levels of chemicals and minerals in your blood that need to stay within certain ranges. The whole entire pH, acid-base balance of your body needs to stay within certain ranges. So the excretory system helps do all those things. Regulates the blood pressure by controlling the amount of fluids in your body, and which also controls your hydration status. The pH of the blood gets adjusted in the kidneys, and the electrolytes and mineral levels in your blood get adjusted by the kidneys. It also removes waste and excess water from the body, which has to, again, kind of go back to this controlling your hydration status and also the blood pressure in some ways. But it also, with waste removal, blood is filtered, so we get harmful waste out of the blood. Those wastes are creatinine, that's spelled wrong, urea, and uric acid. Mineral levels are adjusted so they stay within normal ranges. Four major parts of the system are your kidneys, ureters, bladder, and urethra. You will need to label this, and while I'm talking about that, the test is going to be 75 points. There's 30 multiple choice questions, a labeling section worth 5 points, and a matching section worth 10 points, so 75 total because your multiple choice are worth 2 each. Remember, you have 2 kidneys. Most people have 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, 1 bladder, 1 urethra. So let's talk about the kidneys, the most important part of this system. They're located in the back. The retroperitoneal area is what they refer to that as, which means behind. Retro, the peritoneum, that sac that kind of encases all the abdominal organs. The major function of the kidneys, it really, if you go back up to all the functions of the system, all of those functions really happen in the kidneys. So the cleaning and the filtering of the liquid portion of the blood, remember it's the plasma that gets filtered, balancing of the chemicals, all that gets adjusted inside the kidneys, the amount of water that comes in and out of the urine and the blood, that's all controlled in the kidneys. Urine production occurs in the kidneys. And the kidneys also produce chemicals, so pay attention to this. Make sure you know that the kidneys produce and secrete these 2 chemicals called renin and erythropoietin. Renin has to deal with blood pressure regulation, and erythropoietin gets sent to the bone marrow to stimulate red blood cell production. So the kidneys also have a role in blood pressure regulation, not only because of hydration status, but because of this chemical and red blood cell production. Blood flow to the kidneys, obviously it's going to be important because blood is what's being filtered. So to get 2 kidneys, we have like a direct link off the abdominal portion of the aorta. So the aorta will branch off to right and left renal arteries. Arteries travel away from the heart, so they're going to the kidneys. And then to get back to the heart, when blood gets filtered and it's ready to get back into the bloodstream, it's going to leave the kidneys via a renal vein because veins always travel toward the heart. So the renal vein will take blood away from the kidney, and it has a direct link into that inferior vena cava, which will go directly back up to the heart. So pretty significant blood vessels. The 3 major sections of the kidney, as we described in your PowerPoint and your book talks about, are the cortex, the medulla, and the hilum's not really a section of the kidney, it's just like a region, that indented region. So the cortex is the outer portion. Remember the nephrons, those tiny little filters, there's all sorts of different parts to them. So most of the parts of the nephron, the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule, and a lot of the parts of the tubule are in the renal cortex, but some parts of the nephron do dip down into the medulla, and the medulla will be where the urine travels through in tubules and the renal pelvis to get out of the kidney. So the medulla is just kind of like a transportation area. The hilum, again, was that indented portion, and things enter and leave like blood vessels, renal arteries, and veins, and the renal pelvis of the ureter is going to enter and leave through the hilum, indented area. Nephrons are the actual filtering units inside the kidney, so they are very, very important. Blood is filtered and urine is produced here. Most of the nephron, again, is in the cortex, but some parts of them are in the medulla, and there are tons and tons and tons of them. So imagine how tiny they are, because you have these, relatively small kidneys, but inside those kidneys there's over 1 million nephrons. I do want you to make sure you understand the main parts. 1 and 2 are really the biggies, glomerulus and Bowman's capsule. Glomerulus, remember, it's blood being filtered. So the glomerulus of the nephron is the part that brings the blood in to be filtered. So it's all these capillaries, tiny blood vessels that allow things in and out. So in the glomerulus, blood will enter and plasma will be filtered out, and other chemicals and waste will be filtered out of the blood, and that stuff, water, will enter the Bowman's capsule. So that cup-shaped portion that's going to lead to all the tubules. So the initial urine product enters the Bowman's capsule first before it goes through 3, 4, 5, and 6, proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. So in all of those, really just understand in general these last 4 parts here, all the tubules in the loop, that's where urine is adjusted. So what first enters the Bowman's capsule isn't going to be your final urine product, because again, this has to be tailored to the body's needs. So water and minerals and waste will get absorbed and reabsorbed from those tubules back into the blood and so forth to make sure that the urine is what we actually need to be getting rid of. So it's pretty amazing if you think about what the kidneys and the nephrons are doing. Next up, after we leave the nephrons of the kidneys and the collecting ducts, we're going to be entering the ureter. So this is just the path that urine travels now. The collecting ducts will all kind of congregate into one major renal pelvis in the kidney, and the renal pelvis is the first part of the ureter tube. So the ureter is a tube about 1 foot long. There's 1 per kidney, 1 leaves each kidney, and it's just transporting the urine from the kidney to the bladder. Again, that first part is called the renal pelvis. And peristalsis will happen here. They're muscular tubes lined with smooth muscle, so we have this rhythmic motion forcing the urine into the bladder, but also, if you think about it, for the most part, you're standing up, so gravity can help as well. The bladder is just the storage part of the system, so urine is stored here until it's ready to be released. It is muscular because we need to be able to move urine out of it. It contains rugae just like the stomach, those folds, so it can expand, and it's held in place by that urinary sphincter. If you remember, a sphincter is a ring-shaped muscle we talked about in the GI system. So when after you get potty trained, you're able to control that sphincter muscle and control when you release your urine. The urethra is the last part, the last tube that leaves the bladder. So urine travels through the urethra to get out of the body. The very end, the opening of the urethra where the urine actually exits, is called the urinary meatus. Males, remember, if you think about the male anatomy, the urethra is going to be much longer than the females. And also kind of comes together with the reproductive system in the male. So it's a pathway for both urine and semen. In females, it's shorter and it's only a urinary system function, so only urine travels through the female urethra. Urine itself, remember, is just a liquid waste product produced in the kidneys. It's 95% water, but that can be adjusted based on your hydration status. There's minerals like sodium, potassium. There's waste products, again, that urea, uric acid, and creatinine. There might be small amounts of sugar, but that's usually present with diabetes, so there really shouldn't be much sugar at all, if any. What really shouldn't be in urine are red blood cells and white blood cells, because remember, again, it's the plasma of the blood. 3 parts of blood are plasma, red and white cells. Only plasma is what should be being filtered out in the nephron, not red blood cells and white blood cells, and also not protein. So those things can indicate disease or problems with the kidneys.